A crazy rumor about the Jets trading up to the top pick in the NFL draft for Miami quarterback Cam Ward should make fans consider how to deal with offseason rumors. That and more today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Thursday, February 20th, 2025, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listener, first watch every day. We have a lot to get to today. There is talk that the way you watch NFL games may be changing in the future. The Jets got some relatively positive news pertaining to the salary cap on Wednesday, but let's begin by talking about the rumor which took the fan base by storm yesterday, and it kind of came out of nowhere. And the way this rumor came out of nowhere can kind of teach us some lessons about how we should deal with the offseason, particularly rumors as they pertain to the New York Jets. There's a writer from a publication, PFN 365, who tweeted out that the Jets have contacted the Tennessee Titans to discuss the number one pick in the NFL draft to get Cam Ward. And Cam Ward is the quarterback at the University of Miami, viewed as one of the top quarterback prospects in this year's draft, perhaps a contender to go number one overall to either the Tennessee Titans or a team that trades up for the number one pick with Tennessee. Now, again, the report is that the Jets called the Titans to discuss trading up. Now, it's important to understand that the New York Jets at some point this offseason are going to be linked with a rumor to every free agent available, every trade target available, every NFL draft pick available. And I think that this episode can teach us some lessons because, again, the fan base went crazy. You saw like Jets content creators commenting on it. You see, you saw fans going crazy in comment sections and message boards. And now I'm talking about it. The Jets reportedly, if this tweet's to be believed, they contacted the Titans to discuss the number one pick to get Cam Ward. Now, that itself is, I guess, somewhat newsworthy. But it's newsworthy from the standpoint that the Jets are performing due diligence. The people running the Jets would not be doing their job if they were not calling the team with the number one overall pick and trying to figure out what the price would be to move up, or if the Titans are even interested in moving up, because that could dictate strategy in any number of ways, because the Jets may know teams that want to move up and they could try and, plan out the draft. If this team moves up, how does that change the players who will be available? And the Jets may like Cam Ward. It may be a situation where the Jets, may not want to give up multiple first round picks, but if the Titans are willing to part with the pick for a surprisingly low price, maybe the Jets will be willing to move up. Back in the 2009 draft, the Jets moved up from 17 to 5 in a trade with the Cleveland Browns. And they did that for Mark Sanchez. All the Jets needed to give up was a second round pick and then a couple of backup players. And if Mark Sanchez had panned out, that would be one of the trades of the century, to move up 12 spots in the first round into the top 5 for your franchise quarterback. Of course, Sanchez did not work out. So, so much for that. But, again, like, you'd expect the Jets to call these guys, because even if the Jets are only interested in moving up if they can get an amazing deal, you got to make sure that you're not going to get an amazing deal. So this itself, it's newsworthy from a standpoint. The Jets are, doing what you'd expect them to do. The people running the Jets are doing their job, if this report's to be believed. But then the tweet follows after the report. In the same tweet, it says, potential trade package: Jets first round pick in 2025, Jets second round pick in 2025, a first round pick in 2026, a second round pick in 2026, and another second round pick in 2027. So this week we go from reporting that the Jets have been in touch with the Titans to wild speculation about what the trade offer would be. And it's just a crazy trade offer at that. The 2 first round picks and 3 second round picks to move up from 7 to 1. That's more than the Rams paid for Matthew Stafford, a proven quarterback who led them to a Super Bowl. That's more than the Panthers paid to trade up with the Bears from 9 to 1 to get Bryce Young 2 years ago. An absolutely ridiculous price. And this is in the same tweet as the report that the Jets were in contact with the Titans. Now, let's play devil's advocate here. Let's say that the report the report that the Jets called the Titans to gauge their interest in trading down was accurate. that doesn't mean the Jets are necessarily interested in making the move. And it certainly doesn't mean we should just start speculating about what the Jets would give up an offer that crazy. But this is one of the things in the offseason is that sometimes a wild piece of speculation catches fire and then everybody has to respond to it. And then like now we're to the point where I have to respond to this to explain why this is crazy. Look, I can't rule anything out. I can't rule out, the people running the Jets are new at their jobs. Maybe they're crazy enough to make a move like that. But just because they're called the Titans, that doesn't mean that the Jets are now on the verge of giving up 2 first-round picks and 3 second-round picks. We're just pulling out speculation out of the sky. And we don't know, how much the Jets really like Cam Ward. So, and I remember back in January of 2019, it wasn't clear who the Jets were going to hire as their head coach at this point. And then there was this tweet by this guy who was like a high school student. I think his name was Carl. The Jets were close to hiring Matt Rule. And the fan base, like online, just ran with this thing. Like Carl became like this phenomenon. And later that day, the Jets hired a coach, and it wasn't Matt Rule. It was Adam Gase. We have to be careful figuring out who's telling us things. It's one thing if Adam Schefter is giving us a report. It's one thing if Ian Rappaport's, telling us which players might interest the Jets. But hearing that the Jets call the team to just broadly speak about in vague terms about potentially moving up for a specific player, that's not all that instructive because we don't know that the Jets are actually that interested in Cam Ward. And again, like the most likely, a very plausible scenario is, and this is all speculation, if the Jets were able to move up without mortgaging their future, if the Titans were able to take a surprisingly low price for Cam Ward, then of course, that might be a different story. But now, like the way it was treated in the fan base in some quarters was that the Jets are now likely to try and, give this huge package to move up for Ward. And, I get it to an extent. There's not a lot going on. We're, in a couple of weeks before the start of free agency, the draft is still 2 months away. But we shouldn't like jump to conclusions based on, some wild speculation along these lines. So this is important to say, and I don't want to chase the reason I'm mentioning this is not because I want to, breathe oxygen into every wild rumor that's out there, but I just want to kind of say this once at the start of the offseason that, this is a good example of why, we should not be obsessing over every single rumor because you can't rule anything out. I think common sense would dictate the odds of the Jets paying a higher price than the Rams paid for Matthew Stafford or the Panthers paid the Bears for Bryce Young. It doesn't seem very likely. But if you listen to people who were following on the internet yesterday, it sounded very likely. Sometimes rumors pop up and they're good pieces for discussion. We actually discussed the idea of trading up for Cam Ward yesterday on our mailbag show because that was a mailbag question I got. Occasionally a rumor, hypothetically, you game it out. You see, like you think about what the Jets may do here or there. But that doesn't mean the Jets are only on the verge of moving up to number 1 overall. And we shouldn't treat it that way. And, I know like I'm probably pouring gasoline onto the fire by mentioning it, but I feel like the way we address these rumors needs to be mentioned because things got a little out of control yesterday. Okay, end of rant. Ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to turn our attention to a critical part of the Jets offseason. It's the salary cap. And Jets got a bit of good news on that front yesterday. We'll go into what the good news is and what it could mean for the team as we continue here on this Thursday edition of the Locked On Jets podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day, and a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. The NFL offered some salary cap news yesterday, and it's relatively good news for the team. And essentially what it is that the salary cap is going to be higher in 2025 than teams were expecting. Teams were originally expecting the cap to be somewhere between 265 million and 275 million. So somewhere between 265 and 275. The league indicated to teams on Wednesday that the cap will now be between 277.5 million and 281.5 million. So a raise in the cap. A cap will go up by a higher amount than expected. Now, it's good news for the Jets because the Jets will have more salary cap room to play with than they expected. The thing is, it's all every other team, the cap's going up for just as much. So relatively speaking, it's not an advantage for the Jets per se over any other team because every team's getting the extra cap space. It's really good news for the players more than anybody else because teams will have more money to spend, and that means the bidding can go a little bit higher. But I always feel like for a team that is really tight up against the cap, finding out that the cap's going up by more than expected it just has a bigger impact because the Jets are not in a great salary cap situation right now. And I don't want to overstate this because Jets are in a situation where they can get their cap into fighting shape in 1 year. They haven't managed the cap well the last 2 years, and it's put them in a tight spot this year. I mean, if you look at their current projection, so over the cap's current projection is that the Jets have about $24 million in salary cap space. That number will probably go up with the new projections. And, you just look at the cap. I mean, I can give you one figure right now. Jets currently have $22 million in dead money. And that's from Tyler Conklin, who's going to count against the cap, even though his contract expires. Conklin's going to count almost $6 million against the cap. Mike Williams is going to count almost $6 million against the cap. DJ Reed's going to count $4.6 million against the cap. Javon Kinlaw is going to count $4.4 million against the cap. These are for guys who aren't going to be here. It speaks volumes about the way the Jets manage the cap, and that doesn't even talk about the $49 million the Jets owe Aaron Rodgers. Although the Jets can split that, if they Jets designate Rodgers what's known as a post June 1st cut, they can make it $14 million this year, $35 million next year. Jets are in a very tight cap situation, and it's not just about the pure amount of money you have to spend. It's also about how much you need. And the Jets have a lot of holes they have to fill. They're going to need a quarterback, number one. They're going to need a right tackle. They're probably going to need to fill 2 of the 3 wide receiver spots. Garrett Wilson's going to be back, but Devontae Adams is probably going to be cut. Now, cutting Devontae Adams, that'll free up about $30 million in cap space. So that's good. Allen Lazard's going to be cut. That's going to free up another $6.6 million in cap space. But you look across the defensive tackle, they don't really have a lot there. At the linebacker position, you'd like to bring back Jamie Sherwood. You have a corner position you need to fill. You could probably stand to upgrade at both safety spots. And, you got to have enough money to sign your draft class. You got to have enough money for the practice squad. You got to have a little left over for signing players to replace injured guys who go to IR when you have a free roster spot. That money just doesn't go very far. And it won't go very far for the New York Jets, but there's a little bit more money. And maybe that helps you fit one extra free agent in. If you're bidding against another team, maybe that $5 million extra dollars, maybe that's something you can use to outbid another team. Now, of course, the other team has $5 million extra dollars, but maybe they want to spend the money elsewhere. It's just a little thing, and the little things can add up. You look at the Jets. One of the challenging things about the Jets cap situation is that there just aren't many places they can go to for cap savings this year. I mean, the 2 guys I named for you they can cut, Devontae Adams, who will save about $30 million against the cap, and Allen Lazard, who will save over $6 million. These are the only guys the Jets can cut that would save even $4 million. I mean, you go down the list. I mean, the next highest amount of savings from cutting a player would be Michael Clemens, who would save you about $3 million. Maybe you do that. Breece Hall would also save you $3 million, but you're not going to do that. So just don't have many places to go to create extra cap space. So a little extra flexibility will do this team good. And again, it might mean like one extra free agent at a key spot, but again, if we're being realistic, and this is the Jets cap situation is part of the reason they're probably not going to be team that wins big next year because they just have so many spots they need to fill. And they just don't have a tremendous amount of cap space. Now, the good news is, once you get past this season, once you get to 2026, the Jets don't have as many commitments. Rodgers, if they just get rid of Rodgers this year, if they just take the full $49 million hit this year, the cap really becomes clear in a year. Now, there are some guys the Jets will still have some guys who will count against their salary cap, but the commitments really go down, and the Jets will be in position to be one of the teams that has the most cap space in the league. Jets be in position to be big spenders in free agency. Jets, and with some smart spending, they'll be able to fill some of their major holes. Now, none of this is an excuse next year for the Jets to not be competitive, because despite having holes, despite not having a ton of resources, there is a base of talent here. This is something we've discussed extensively on this show. We're not back in the position where the Jets were in 2021 when Robert Saleh took over as head coach. We're not in the position where they were in 2019 when Joe Douglas and Adam Gase took over. We're not in the position where they were in 2015 when Mike McCagnon and Todd Bowles took over. We're not in the position where we were in 2013 when John Idzik took over. By the way, none of those people were that great at their jobs anyway, but Jets in all of those situations essentially had bottom of the league talent. This Jets team does not have bottom of the league talent. And despite the Jets, being a team that disappointed last year, I don't think anybody would say that should have been a 5-win team. Now, I think the talent may have been overrated before the season when we were talking about them potentially being contenders, but there was a team that probably should have won closer to 7-8 games. And there are some things to figure out, but some smart targeted signings. You have to remember the teams that spend the most in free agency are not always the teams that win the offseason. The teams that make the flashiest moves, that get the most media praise, that receive all of the love from NFL Network and ESPN, those aren't the teams that typically win the offseason. The teams that win the offseason are the ones that make the under the radar signings that pan out. Now, just under the radar signings themselves don't necessarily, just because the signings under the radar doesn't necessarily mean it's bound for success. But if the Jets make smart moves, if the Jets take their small amount of cap space and find guys who fit the system, guys who maybe aren't heralded, guys who maybe don't have a ton of demand from other teams, but guys who fit the systems the Jets are running, and fill some of their holes that way, this could be a very competitive football team. And that little extra amount of cap space, again, it's not a lot. It's not a game changer. It's not going to, turn the Jets into contenders overnight. It's not going to make a massive difference, but it's a little amount, and it's an amount that maybe helps them fit one or two other guys in, and guys who maybe leave you one less hole heading into the season. Now, had you heard the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll turn our attention to the way NFL games are shown. There was a report earlier this week that there could be a new home of Sunday afternoon games when the next TV deal comes up. And we'll talk about what that means for Jets fans and fans across the NFL as we continue here on this Thursday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because with FanDuel, you can place live bets through the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. You'll love using FanDuel's betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether you're backing your team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, you'll never feel like you missed your chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. And right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Thursday. We're going to end the show today by talking about an issue that would impact not just the Jets, but teams across the league, and in particular fans across the league. It deals with the way NFL games are shown. There was an interview that Puck News did with Netflix's chief content officer, and the chief content officer essentially said that Netflix is planning on making a bid the next time the NFL TV deal becomes available. Netflix wants to be a place where Sunday afternoon games are shown. Right now, NFL Sunday afternoon games are shown on either Fox or CBS. And it's been that way since 1998, since CBS got the AFC package of games in 1998. And the NFL has for the most part, kept its games on the broadcast networks through much of its history on TV. CBS is a longtime partner with the league. It goes back to the 1950s. In fact, you go back to the 1950s, CBS has shown the NFL for the entire time, except a 4-year stretch between the 1994 and 1997 seasons. And Fox has been a league partner since 1994. NBC also has a long history with the leagues. They've shown Sunday Night Football since 2006. And prior to that, they were a longtime partner with the league outside of a brief 8-year stretch. So this could be a big change. Could we see Sunday afternoon games on Netflix? Now, this report has led to a lot of frustration and some panic among NFL fans. So what does this all mean? Well, the first thing to know is that NFL games are not going to Netflix anytime soon. The NFL's current TV deal runs through the year 2033. Now, the NFL can opt out of that 4 years early, but that would take us through 2029. We're in 2025 right now. The 2025 season hasn't begun, so we're talking at the earliest 5 years down the line. NFL can opt out of its TV deal in 5 years, but until then, nothing's going to change. The only option Netflix would have would be to buy the games directly from CBS or Fox, and if you follow like these things, it's very unlikely that either CBS or Fox would sell games directly to Netflix because the NFL is really valuable to these networks and broadcast TV. And I follow this stuff, so I'm interested in it. Broadcast TVs has a lot of challenges. One of the few things that one of the few properties which remains really valuable to broadcast networks like CBS and Fox are NFL games, because people are really interested in the NFL. The NFL is the most popular league in the country. NFL is one of the most popular entities in the United States. So very unlikely we'll see Sunday afternoon games go to Netflix anytime soon. Netflix, you may remember, did have a couple Christmas Day games this year. The NFL seems to like Netflix. More games could move to Netflix in the future, but we're not anywhere close. We're at least years away from Sunday afternoon games being Netflix and Netflix being a staple of the afternoon. What are some other things to know about this? First is that, and people will not like this, but streamers are becoming more and more a part of not just our everyday consuming habits, but live sports. We've seen Thursday Night Football move to Prime, Amazon, and I remember when that happened, there was a lot of frustration, but now we're 3 years in and it seems normal. And I would imagine 30, 40 years ago when sports moved to cable off broadcast networks, there was probably a lot of the same frustration you hear now about sports moving to streamers. It's just a part of life. It's the way things are moving. It's the direction entertainment is going. Streamers are more important now. And that's just the direction things are going in. I would be interested in, I think a lot of this will depend on where broadcast networks are in 5 years. And we don't really know because the media landscape is changing so much. Will CBS and Fox still be alive? Will Fox and CBS still be around in their current form? That's difficult to say. We don't really know. There is a school of thought that broadcast networks are in decline. And there's ample evidence behind that. Could we see some sort of change where broadcast networks go straight to streaming? We don't really know. But there's another pathway here that's plausible, and it's based on a change that was made in the latest TV deal the NFL made. In the current TV deal, which went into place in 2023, there was a subtle change. It's a change that's so subtle you may not have noticed it. Prior to 2023, the NFL sold its package of AFC games and its package of NFC games separately. And since 1998, in every TV deal, the CBS bought the package of AFC games, so every AFC game was on CBS, and every NFC game was on Fox. And the two networks could trade games at certain points. The league had options to flex games from one network to another, but primarily CBS was buying AFC games, Fox was buying NFC games. In the latest TV deal, the NFL did away with that. Essentially, they just said there are two afternoon time slots. CBS, you buy some of our afternoon games. Fox, you buy some of our afternoon games. We're not going to differentiate between AFC and NFC. And you may have noticed the last 2 years, the Jets have played on Fox a lot more than they did in the past. And that's the reason, because CBS games are no longer exclusively on CBS. NFC games are no longer exclusively on Fox. The NFL essentially said, we're selling two packages of afternoon games. You get whatever games go your way, that's what you're broadcasting. And that's why, you probably noticed more, not just the Jets, but more NFC games on CBS, more AFC games on Fox the last 2 years. It's possible the league decides to sell Netflix one of their packages. It's also possible the league just decides, we're going to sell 3 packages of afternoon games. CBS will show some afternoon games. Fox will show some afternoon games. Netflix will show some afternoon games. Again, a lot of this depends on what the media landscape looks like in 2029. But the NFL has always had a policy that they want to get as many broadcast providers as possible because they want CBS advertising for their league. They want Fox advertising for their league. They want ABC and ESPN advertising. They want NBC advertising. They want Amazon advertising. I'm sure they'd love to have Netflix because then Netflix starts advertising for the NFL. One of the genius aspects of the NFL is that they have as many different broadcast providers as possible. So all of them are promoting the league. So that's not out of the realm of possibility. So none of this is anytime soon, but interesting. And just a reminder of the way the landscape of televised sports is changing, and it might be something we have to get used to. The good news, if you don't like it, is you won't have to get used to it anytime soon because it's way off in the distance. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Thursday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to close out the week.